The relic appeared exactly where nothing was supposed to be. Arch-strategist Kael'reth observed it from the command dais, its signal resolving slowly on the primary void display. A single contact. No escort bloom. No formation shadow. Just one. Mass drifting out of interstellar dark, its drive wake faint and unsophisticated. The bridge filled with restrained amusement. "Confirm classification," Kael'reth said. "Confirmed," the sensor cadre replied. "Human origin. Single hull. Displacement far below modern combat standards." Kael'reth inclined his crest slightly. Humans. The name carried a particular flavor of irrelevance, an extinct adjacent species that had resisted integration until resistance became inconvenient. Their remaining worlds had been pacified generations ago, their fleets dismantled, their technology archived as a cautionary example of brute stagnation. And now one of their ships wandered into a Ravager zone alone. Visual. "Overlay," Kael'reth ordered. The image sharpened. Thick armor bands. Exposed structural ribs. No luminous shield lattice, no adaptive hull shimmer. The vessel looked carved rather than grown, assembled instead of evolved. "Primitive," someone said, not unkindly. "It's flying a fortress," Kael'reth allowed a thin smile. A coffin, then. The Ravager armada held position. 4,012 vessels arranged in layered dominance, their silhouettes elegant and lethal. Against that backdrop, the human warship looked absurd. Outdated mass clinging to outdated physics, processing protocols auto-populated, Kael'reth's console. Species classification, resistant, recommended action, demonstrate inevitability, then collect. "Transmit standard ultimatum," Kael'reth said. "Compliance window, 7 minutes. The message went out across every band, legal language encoded with authority symbols older than most stars in this sector. Power down, disarm, submit crews for processing, survival guaranteed. The human ship did not respond. It continued forward. Yet a constant burn, closing distance from 600,000 kilometers to 580,000 with no deviation. "They may not be receiving," a junior tactician offered. "They are receiving," Kael'reth replied. "They are simply deciding how long to pretend otherwise." Laughter rippled softly across the bridge. The armada adjusted posture. Forward elements primed energy lances, keeping yields deliberately low. This was not an extermination scenario. This was instruction. Time ticked down. The human ship remained silent. A standalone line flashed across Kael'reth's display, his own annotation recorded for the log. "One ship." "At this mass," a weapons officer said, "their inertia limits acceleration. They cannot evade." "They will not need to," Kael'reth replied. "They will comply." The timer reached 3, still no response. The human vessel crossed 520,000 kilometers. Its profile remained unchanged. No shield bloom, no defensive emission. It did not even alter course to suggest fear. Irritation replaced amusement. "Prepare a light demonstration," Kael'reth said. 10% yield, center mass." "Yes." Arch-strategist. Energy conduits brightened across the forward ranks, targeting solutions locked with trivial ease. The human ship drifted on, mute and unremarkable, a relic sliding toward an appointment it could not survive. Kael'reth leaned, back, already bored. "This will be over in minutes," he said. "Record the impact for archival completeness." The armada finished charging its weapons as the distance counter dipped below 500,000 kilometers. The relic did not slow, it did not answer, it simply came closer. Submission was framed as mercy. Arch-strategist Kael'reth ensured the transmission carried every symbol of authority the Ravager Coalition possessed. The ultimatum, unfolded across open bands and encrypted channels alike, encoded in legal dialects, refined over centuries of conquest. "Human vessel," the proclamation declared, "you are in violation of sovereign transit exclusion, armament, interdiction and post-resistance species protocol. Power down all systems. Jettison weapon cores. Prepare crew for processing. Compliance window, 7 minutes." 7 minutes was generous. Excessively so. It was meant to be remembered as restraint. Kelreth watched the countdown appear on the void display. 26:59. The human ship did not alter course. Its engines burned steadily, unsophisticated thrust, pushing a mass that should have been sluggish. Distance closed from 500,000 kilometers to 470,000, with no evasive vector, no hesitation. They are stalling, a tactician said. Perhaps buying time to transmit farewells? Perhaps, Kelreth replied. Or perhaps they believe silence is dignity. The armada adjusted formation slightly, maintaining layered fire arcs. Boarding tenders warmed their bays. Processing holds recalibrated atmospheric mixes for human biology. Capacity estimates scrolled. 1.2 million individuals could be contained without delay. The timer struck 5 gan, still nothing. A second broadcast was issued, firmer in tone, stripping away ceremonial phrasing. Human vessel failure to comply will result in immediate neutralization. The human ship crossed 440,000 kilometers. A response arrived at last. It was not routed through diplomatic codex. It came as a narrow-band transmission, unencrypted, centered and precise. No emblem, no preamble. A human voice spoke, even and unhurried. This is Human Vessel Command. Kelreth leaned forward, irritation sharpening into focus. We acknowledge receipt of your ultimatum, the voice continued. We decline. No explanation followed. A murmur rippled across the bridge. Confusion. First, then offense. You decline? Kelreth said aloud, activating his channel. You face annihilation. The reply came without pause. Understood. A brief silence. Then the human voice resumed, as if reading from an operational checklist. We do not recognize your authority. We will not disarm. We will not submit our crew for processing. We will continue on our current vector. A standalone line appeared on Kelreth's internal log, unbidden. They said no, the timer read 3:42. You are alone, Kelreth said, keeping his tone level. You are outnumbered 4,000 to 1. Numbers acknowledged. The human replied. Another pause. Deliberate! Our schedule remains unchanged. What schedule? Kelreth demanded. The answer was simple. Operational. The channel closed. No threat followed. No declaration of war. No attempt at persuasion. Just refusal, delivered without heat. On the display, the human ship crossed 400,000 kilometers. They are advancing, a tactician said unnecessarily. Yes, Kelreth replied, staring at the shrinking distance. They are. The countdown reached 2, quite as Kelreth felt the first prickle of unease. Not fear, but the irritation of an equation behaving incorrectly. Compliance was supposed to be the rational choice. Submission always came before destruction. The human vessel did neither. It ignored authority. It ignored inevitability. It kept coming, steady and silent, as if the outcome had already been decided and the remaining time was merely administrative. The first strike was meant to instruct arch-strategist Kelreth, authorized it with practiced indifference. Not extermination, yet, but a controlled demonstration of scale. The Ravager armada aligned forward elements, energy emitters phasing into harmonic coherence across thousands of hulls. Fire, Kelreth said. Light crossed the void. Lances of coherent energy converged on the human ship at 380,000 kilometers. Enough force to fracture moons, enough precision to leave nothing but expanding debris. The beams struck the hull dead center. They vanished, no flare, no scatter, no recoil bloom. For 0.7 seconds, the bridge was silent. Confirm impact, Kelreth ordered. Impact confirmed, the sensor cadre replied, voice tightening. Energy transfer detected, no penetration, no hull ablation. Numbers scrolled across the display, updating in real time. Absorption efficiency, 91.4%, 91.9%, 92.2%. Kelreth leaned forward. Where is the discharge? There is none, the cadre said. Energy is being converted and dispersed across the hull volume. Heat accumulation at 3.8% of expected. A low murmur spread through the command tier. "That is not shielding," a weapons officer said. "That is refusal." Kael'reth felt irritation spike. "Increase yield. 30%. The armada complied. More beams, higher intensity. Overlapping vectors designed to saturate and overwhelm. The result did not change. 6%. 2.8%. 3.0%. The human ship did not maneuver. It did not flare countermeasures. It did not even adjust orientation. It absorbed the barrage with the patience of stone weathering rain. A standalone line appeared on the tactical overlay generated by the BattleNet. Fire had no effect. "Switch frequencies," Kael'reth snapped. "In-cycle harmonics. Target internal power signatures." Commands cascaded, emitters shifted. Exotic bands engaged, gravitic shear, particle wash, destabilization fields meant to interact with matter itself. The beams struck. They disappeared. 1%, 2%, 2%, no. "Escalation response detected," the sensor cadre reported. "No overload threshold identified." Kael'reth's mandibles tightened. Doctrine insisted that every defense failed under sufficient input, that mass and energy always resolved into damage. "This is not defense," a tactician said quietly. "It's invalidation." The distance counter continued its steady march. 1,000 kilometers, the human ship advanced as if the armada were not firing at all. "Prepare saturation fire," Kael'reth said. "All forward ranks, maximum output." The order was executed without hesitation. Thousands of emitters discharged simultaneously, space between fleets filled with annihilating brilliance. When it faded, the human ship was unchanged. Hull integrity. In nominal heat levels. Stable trajectory constant. A second standalone line pulsed across Kael'reth's display, colder than the first. Energy goes nowhere. Silence returned, heavier than before. Kael'reth searched the data feeds for anything. Spikes. Anomalies, warnings of delayed failure. There were none. The armor was not resisting energy, it was converting it, locking it, rendering it inert. "They are letting us shoot," a junior officer whispered. Kael'reth did not correct him. The realization had already taken root. The Ravager Armada had committed to a doctrine that no longer applied. The human ship crossed 300,000 kilometers. Engine output ticked up slightly, as if acknowledging that the demonstration phase was complete. Kael'reth felt certainty erode, replaced by something colder and more dangerous. The first law of the battle had just been broken, and whatever came, it next would not be instructional. Mass was supposed to limit intent. Arch-strategist Kael'reth had trusted that law longer than any other. Heavy ships endured. They absorbed punishment. They did not surge. They did not close distance at will. The human ship surged. Without warning, its engine profile spiked. Clean, synchronized output across drives that should not have tolerated. The load. Acceleration indicators climbed with dispassionate precision. 03C, Mont 0, 05C, und 07C. "That mass cannot sustain," a tactician began. The sentence died as structural readouts stayed green. No frame distortion. No crew-fatal inertia spikes. No loss of control. The human ship did not shudder. It leaned into the burn. Distance collapsed from 300,000 kilometers to 240,000 in seconds. Kael'reth felt irritation sharpen into disbelief. "Redeploy forward screen. Maintain spacing." The order propagated. Execution lagged. Ravager formations were built on depth and distance, layered fire arcs designed to kill at range. The human acceleration invalidated geometry the way their armor had invalidated energy. Space that should have existed simply vanished. C sustained. A stand-alone line flashed on Kael'reth's display, unrequested and unwelcome. They closed the gap. Panic crept in at the edges of the armada. Captains began to maneuver independently, micro-adjustments stacking into disorder. Some attempted lateral burns. Others pulled back to preserve firing envelopes that no longer aligned. The human ship continued straight in. They are not juking, a weapons officer said. No evasive pattern. No, Kael'reth replied. They are counting. Distance dropped below 180,000 kilometers. Energy fire resumed in scattered bursts. Less doctrine now, more reflex. The beams vanished as before. The human ship did not acknowledge them. Attempt short-range displacement, Kael'reth ordered. Reset distance. Several Ravager vessels complied, micro-jumps tearing small holes in local space. Most succeeded. One did not. A cruiser re-emerged, less than 5,000 kilometers off the human ship's bow. The human vessel did not deviate. The collision lasted less than a second. The cruiser ceased to exist, reduced to expanding vapor and shrapnel. The human ship plowed through the debris field without measurable deceleration. Loss? Kael'reth demanded. Single cruiser, the sensor cadre replied. Human hull integrity unchanged. Silence followed, brittle and stunned. The distance counter dipped below 120,000 kilometers. They're using mass, a strategist said slowly. Not as protection, as momentum. Yes, Kael'reth said. He felt the realization settle like ice. And they planned for this range. The human ship's acceleration eased, not because it had to, but because it had arrived where it intended to be. New emissions spooled along its hull, ports, rails, apertures that had remained inert while energy doctrine failed. A second standalone line appeared, stark and final. This is too close. Ravager formations attempted a full redeploy, abandoning layered doctrine entirely. It was too late. The human ship occupied the space those doctrines required to function. Distance: 90,000 kilometers. Kael'reth watched the human vessel adjust orientation by fractions of a degree, aligning with the densest cluster of Ravager hulls. No haste, no fury, just positioning. He understood then that the human had not closed distance to survive. It had closed distance to begin. As the first kinetic systems finished spooling and targeting solutions snapped into place, Kael'reth felt the last illusion break. Energy had failed. Distance had failed. What came next would not be theoretical. The first kinetic strike arrived without spectacle. Arch-strategist Kael'reth saw the launch indicators before his mind accepted them. Ports along the human ship's hull opening in blunt, mechanical sequence. No energy bloom, no harmonic buildup. Just mass released into motion. Projectile weapons, a weapons officer said, disbelief sharpening his voice. Pure kinetics. At this distance? Another demanded. The answer crossed 90,000 kilometers in less than a heartbeat. Railgun slugs struck the forward Ravager wing with catastrophic finality. Shields flared on instinct and failed instantly, overwhelmed not by exotic physics, but by momentum measured in obscene fractions of light speed. Hulls ruptured, reactors breached. 5 capital ships ceased to exist in a straight line, destruction propagating faster than alarms could cascade. A standalone line burned across the tactical. Display 1, salvo. Damage report, Kael'reth snapped. Wing Theta destroyed, the sensor cadre replied. 112 vessels lost in 2.8 seconds. Kael'reth felt the bridge tilt, not physically, but in assumption. That wing had been reinforced for siege engagement, layered against energy saturation. None of it mattered when confronted. With force that did not negotiate with fields, the human ship fired again. Railguns cycled with metronomic precision. Fire, recoil, reset. Each discharge erased another cluster, targets chosen with algorithmic calm. The shots were not sprayed. They were placed, casualty counters climbed in clean steps. 100 lost, 40, 790. Ravager formations attempted evasive dispersal. It failed. The human targeting solutions adjusted faster than captains could maneuver. Missile bays opened next. Hundreds of launches spilled into space, not in a swarm but in disciplined packets. The missiles arced outward, then corrected inward, guidance systems updating continuously as Ravager ships broke formation. Countermeasures, Kael'reth ordered. All point defenses, interceptors launched. Energy webs snapped into place. It was insufficient. The missiles did not seek shield gaps. They sought mass concentrations, command nodes, carrier clusters, logistics cores. Nuclear signatures bloomed, yields tuned with surgical restraint. Shockwaves overlapped, crushing hulls that had survived the initial blast. Entire flotillas vanished. A second standalone line appeared, stark and unforgiving. Mass does not argue. The human ship advanced through the expanding wreckage, acceleration steady, fire cadence unchanged. It did not chase fleeing targets. It did not waste munitions on debris. Each shot had an accounting purpose. Enemy losses exceeding 1,400, the sensor cadre reported. Engagement time since first kinetic fire, 9 minutes. 9 minutes. Kael'reth watched as a Ravager command carrier attempted to retreat, engines flaring in desperation. A missile packet intercepted, detonating beneath its hull. The ship folded inward, core collapse tearing a hole through adjacent formations. Surrender pings began to appear. Some Ravager captains powered down weapons. Others transmitted compliance codes meant for processing protocols, desperate to be seen as useful rather than defiant. The human ship did not alter fire immediately. Railguns continued to cycle, but their focus narrowed. Only active weapons platforms. Only ships still attempting to maneuver offensively. Where power downs registered, targeting brackets faded. They are differentiating, a tactician whispered. Yes, Kael'reth said. They are choosing. Loss counters climbed again. 100. Destroyed or disabled. Human losses, 0. The disparity was no longer shocking. It was explanatory. A human transmission cut through the chaos, same narrowband, same unhurried voice. Kinetic phase proceeding as scheduled, it said. All vessels powering down will not be fired upon. Medical assistance will follow. Medical assistance. The words landed heavier than any detonation. Kael'reth felt something cold settle in his core. This was not annihilation doctrine. This was dismantlement, paced to allow comprehension. The human ship fired one last railgun salvo into a still-resisting wing. 37 ships vanished. Then the guns went quiet. Missiles ceased launch. Nuclear signatures faded. The wreckage drifted, vast and undeniable. One ship, a junior officer said hoarsely. They did this with one ship. Kael'reth did not answer. He stared at the casualty totals and understood that the human had never intended to kill everyone. It had intended to make resistance mathematically impossible. The firing had rewritten the battle. What followed would rewrite the war. The guns fell, silent by choice. Arch-strategist Kael'reth noticed it before any sensor alert confirmed it. The human ship's rail apertures sealed. Missile bays closed. The void, moments ago saturated with violence, settled into a quiet that felt intentional, rather than exhausted. A wideband transmission activated, not narrow, not private. It spilled across every channel the Ravager Coalition used, command nets, logistics relays, civilian broadcast bands, even neutral observer arrays that had been silently recording the engagement from light hours away. The human voice returned, unchanged. This is human vessel command. Kinetic operations are paused. No victory declaration followed. Kael'reth waited for threats, for demands, for the kind of language conquerors used when they believed themselves unassailable. Instead, data appeared. Visual records overlaid the tactical display. Processing centers, transport manifests, population quotas stamped with authorization codes. Kael'reth recognized. Holds calibrated for biological containment. Legal clauses permitting indefinite detention under pacification authority. These systems were built to extract labor and compliance, the human voice said, level as a briefing. They were not built to preserve life. The bridge was silent. Even those who had enforced such policies felt the exposure like pressure against their hulls. You designated entire species as resources, the human continued. You enforced obedience through annihilation thresholds. You called it order. Casualty counters updated again, but this time with new metrics, engagement duration, 11 minutes. Ravager vessels disabled or destroyed, 2,184. Human vessels lost, 0 civilian harm, under assessment. A standalone line appeared on every shared display, This is why. We did not arrive for territory, the human voice said. We did not arrive for tribute. We arrived because systems built on slavery and extermination do not stabilize. They metastasize. Kael'reth felt something shift. Not fear, but the collapse of a justification he had relied on for decades. You will cease fire, the transmission continued. You will power down offensive systems. You will disengage along the marked corridors. Now transmitting to your navarrays. Vectors appeared, clean, narrow escape lanes threading through the wreckage. Medical craft are inbound, the human said. Wounded personnel will be treated. Captured crews will be fed and sheltered. Officers responsible for enforced processing will stand trial. A pause. Measured. We do not execute surrendered crews. The words struck harder than the railguns ever had. Around Kael'reth, Ravager officers stared at the displays, recalculating futures that no longer aligned with inevitability. This was not a demand born of weakness. It was policy spoken from a position that had already proven dominance. They planned the aftermath, a strategist murmured. Not just the battle. Yes, Kael'reth said quietly. They planned legitimacy. More data streamed in. Evacuation projections, supply allocations, stabilization schedules. Projected civilian extraction capacity, $20,000 within 6 hours. Human logistics vessels were already on Vector, their arrival times synchronized to the minute. A second standalone line appeared, almost austere. Law follows force. Kael'reth activated his channel, voice steady despite the weight pressing in on him. You claim authority beyond your borders, he said. The reply came immediately. We claim responsibility for what we stop, the human answered. And for what we allow to continue. The channel closed. Weapons across the Ravager formation powered down, not in panic, but in recognition. Escape pods launched, then halted as human guidance beacons redirected them towards safe lanes. The war had shifted shape. It was no longer about who could destroy the most. It was about who would be allowed to decide what came after destruction, and IT. For the first time since the Ravagers had taken to the stars, that answer was no longer them. The revelation arrived without drama. Arch-strategist Kael'reth was watching compliance ripple through the formation when new contacts appeared on the periphery of the void display. Not bursting from transit in chaos, not announcing themselves with power flares, but resolving calmly out of background noise, signatures that had been present long before anyone thought to look for them. Additional human vessels. The sensor, Cadre said, voice tight. Multiple vectors, they are already in position. Kael'reth stared at the timestamps. Arrival margins measured in seconds, some in fractions thereof. No overlap errors, no correction burns. They didn't jump in, he said slowly. They waited. The human voice returned, wideband again, carrying no triumph. For clarity, it said, this operation did not begin today. Data overrode Ravager permissions and spread across the command net like an audit report. Ghost tracks appeared, faint, disciplined trajectories seeded weeks earlier. Empty hulls broadcasting mass, and drive signatures just convincing enough to draw attention. Decoys. The lone ship Kael'reth had mocked had never been bait. It had been a marker. Behind it, beyond standard sensor thresholds, the real formation had unfolded in silence. Logistics ships masked as civilian haulers, strike platforms parked cold, bleeding heat for days to disappear into background radiation. Command nodes drifting along statistically irrelevant vectors that only became relevant once the Ravagers committed. They mapped our approach, a strategist whispered. Yes, Kael'reth said. And our doctrine. Predictive overlays blossomed. Ravager. Decision trees, escalation timelines, retreat probabilities. Kael'reth recognized his own recommendations, highlighted in red, countermeasures already annotated beside them. Human model alignment, 96%. A standalone line cut across the display, stripped of commentary. They expected us. The new human assets locked into a lattice that closed every remaining exit corridor without firing a shot. Where Ravager ships had believed space existed, human mass now waited, quiet, patient, unavoidable. This is a coalition response, the human voice said. Not a reaction. Secondary feeds lit up. Hyperlane choke points flared and then went. Dark as human interdiction units executed simultaneous strikes beyond the primary engagement zone. Patrol fleets vanished. Relay stations went silent. System-wide effects began to cascade. Adjacent sectors are reporting losses, the sensor cadre said. Reinforcement probability approaching 0. Kael'reth felt the scale of it settle, like gravity. The humans were not just dismantling a fleet, they were collapsing the Ravager's ability to project power at all. A second standalone line appeared, colder than the first. The schedule was the weapon. Human ships continued to arrive, not in waves, but in layers, each time to the second. Boarding craft launched only after compliance confirmed. Rescue vessels followed only where fire had ceased. "They're letting them live," a junior officer said, voice strained. "All of them." "Yes," Kael'reth replied. He understood. The cruelty of that mercy now. Survival meant testimony. It meant memory. It meant that this defeat would propagate through the galaxy faster than fear ever had. The void display zoomed out, revealing the full scope of the operation. A web spanning millions of kilometers, every node placed with intent, every movement accounted for. This had never been a duel. It had been an audit, and the Ravagers had failed it before the first shot was fired. As the last decoy signature winked out, its purpose complete, Kael'reth felt inevitability settle fully. At last, the human warship had not been alone. It had simply been first. Collapse did not arrive as chaos. It arrived as sequence. Arch-strategist Kael'reth watched the human lattice tighten with mathematical calm, every movement measured, every vector, closing not toward panic, but toward inevitability. There was no sudden rush, no berserk charge. The humans advanced the way engineers sealed a pressure breach, one segment at a time. "Phase continuation authorized," the human voice announced. "Proceeding." Strike groups separated from the lattice in disciplined arcs, each assigned a region already stripped of uncertainty. They did not hunt. They arrived where targets were guaranteed to be. The first cascade began 3 sectors out. Hyperlane nodes went dark in synchronized pairs, human interdiction platforms firing once and moving on. Ravager supply convoys died without ever seeing. The ships that killed them, railgun slugs punching through freighters whose shields had never been calibrated for kinetic denial. Fuel, ammunition, command bandwidth, all severed. Loss reports stacked faster than Kael'reth could process them. Sector Epsilon logistics failure. Sector Lambda patrol collapse. Sector Theta reinforcement aborted. A standalone line appeared across the command net. This is not a battle. Within the primary engagement zone, the remaining Ravager formations attempted a final consolidation. It lasted 90 seconds. Human strike elements adjusted mid-burn, firing in overlapping sequences that collapsed defensive depth before it could form. Nuclear detonations followed, not saturation strikes, but precision yields timed to shred. Formations without bleeding into evacuation corridors. Hulls crumpled. Crews died. Ships vanished. Casualty counters climbed with brutal steadiness. 400 lost, 1,000.6800. Operational capacity falling below 30%, the sensor cadre reported. Command cohesion failure imminent. Kael'reth felt no anger now. Only the hollow clarity of recognition. This was not rage-driven destruction. This was dismantlement, applied at a rate that maximized comprehension. Human fire ceased wherever power downs registered. Where it did not, destruction resumed without comment. "They are stopping when resistance ends," a strategist said. "Yes," Kael'reth replied, "and nowhere else." Boarding craft launched in controlled waves, targeting intact ships that had gone cold. Docking clamps engaged. Internal feeds, unfiltered now, showed armored humans moving through corridors with weapons lowered, medics immediately behind them. No executions, no reprisals. A second standalone line appeared, almost clinical. Systems, not species. Beyond the Yaes, primary zone, the cascades continued. Relay stations fell silent. Planetary governors transmitted emergency declarations. First neutrality, then disavowal. Some worlds powered down defense grids preemptively, broadcasting surrender codes without ever seeing a human ship. 14 sectors reporting defection, the sensor cadre said. Council-aligned authority falling below quorum. The Ravager Coalition was unraveling faster than it had ever expanded. Kael'reth watched as the last organized resistance attempted a breakout through a narrowing corridor. Human ships did not pursue aggressively. They simply repositioned, closing space until escape vectors vanished. Railguns fired once, the pocket disappeared. Total engagement duration ticked past 3 hours. Ravager losses exceeded 8,900 vessels. Human losses remained unchanged. The numbers were no longer shocking. They were explanatory. "This is domination," a junior officer whispered. "No," Kael'reth said softly. "This is enforcement." The human fleet stabilized its formation amid the wreckage, weapons quiet, rescue craft moving through debris, fields already mapped for survival probability. Evacuation counters ticked upward, millions routed through corridors that had once served as Ravager control arteries. The galaxy was watching now. Neutral observers, former client worlds, species that had survived only by submitting. They were seeing something unprecedented. Power that stopped when it had achieved its objective. A final wideband transmission cut through the silence. "Remaining Ravager assets," the human voice said. "You have 18 minutes to disengage and power down. Continued resistance will be met with proportional force. Proportional.compliance spread in waves. Ships powered down. Crews transmitted surrender codes. Weapons went cold across multiple Mayar sectors at once. At 3 hours, 41 minutes, the casualty counter froze. The collapse was complete. Kael'reth closed his eyes, feeling the weight of inevitability settle fully at last. The humans had not defeated the Ravagers through excess or terror. They had removed every system that allowed the Ravagers to exist as they were. The war, at this scale, was finished. What remained was not resistance. It was reckoning. Genocide never followed. Arch-strategist Kael'reth watched human rescue craft thread through wreckage fields with deliberate care, their paths optimized not for speed, but for survivability. Fires still burned where ships had died, but no secondary strikes descended to finish them. No banners were raised, no victory signals broadcast. Instead, there were docking requests. Human boarding teams entered disabled Ravager vessels with weapons, powered down to low ready. Medical units followed immediately, triage taking precedence over restraint. Wounded crew were stabilized before they were searched. Rank markers were logged, not punished. Species identifiers were catalogued without comment. "You are prisoners," the human officers said, voices even through universal translators. "You will not be harmed. You will receive medical treatment. You will be fed." Kael'reth listened to the internal feeds with a hollow stillness. This was not mercy born of sentiment. It was procedure. A command-level transmission arrived, addressed directly to him. "Terms of cessation attached," the human voice said. "They are final." Kael'reth opened the packet expecting demands. There were none. No territorial seizures, no population transfers, no tribute schedules, only law. All detained personnel would be processed under human war statutes. Officers responsible for enforced labor, biological processing, or extermination policy would stand trial. Evidence had already been compiled. Proceedings would be public. Civilian worlds under Ravager occupation were granted immediate autonomy. Human fleets would provide security, food aid, and infrastructure stabilization for destabilized regions until local governance could be restored. A standalone line appeared across every shared network, translated into dozens of languages at once. Judgment, not genocide. The Ravager command structure fractured within minutes. Sector governors transmitted declarations of neutrality. Some followed with formal alignment requests. Others simply severed connections, unwilling to answer for policies they had enforced under threat. Defection spread faster than panic ever had. 14 occupied sectors have declared independence, the censor cadre reported. Former authority, recognition collapsing. Kael'reth closed his eyes. The Ravagers had ruled through inevitability, through the certainty that resistance ended in extinction. The humans had dismantled that certainty without promising annihilation. Final narrowband transmission reached him as docking clamps engaged with his command vessel. "Arch-strategist Kelreth," the human voice said, "you will be taken into custody. You will be treated with dignity. You will stand trial." Kelreth did not resist. He powered down his command throne and waited as human marines entered the bridge, weapons lowered, restraints ready, but unused. As he was escorted out, he caught one last glimpse of the wider feeds. Worlds broadcasting allegiance not out of fear, but calculation. Choosing a system that punished crimes without erasing populations. Evacuation counters ticked steadily upward. 8 million civilians relocated, then 12, then 20, moved through corridors that had once been tools of control and were now routes to safety. Kelreth understood then what had truly ended the war, not the destruction of fleets, but the removal of any reason to keep fighting. The Ravagers had lost authority. The humans had replaced it with legitimacy, and the galaxy, watching closely, chose accordingly. The war ended quietly, but the censors did not. Human ships held position across the broken sectors, formation steady, weapons cold. Rescue traffic flowed. Trials were scheduled, supply corridors stabilized. The Ravager Coalition, once absolute, existed now only as a legal case file and a cautionary archive. Then the long-range array spoke. It was a tone few bridge crews recognized. Outside of drills, a priority signal from instruments designed to wait decades between meaningful events. "Contact," the sensor officer said. "Outer rim vector, extreme range." The display resolved slowly, layers of noise stripped away by patient algorithms, not a fleet, not yet. A distortion in background radiation, riding the edge of mapped space where charts ended and assumptions began. Human analysts leaned in. No alarm, no disbelief. "Correlation check," Fleet Command said. The answer returned in seconds. Signature. Alignment 88%, then 92%, then 97%. A standalone line appeared, stark and unadorned. Match confirmed. The pattern matched records buried deep in human archives, classified logs predating their first interstellar alliances, older than the wars that had hardened their doctrine. Systems that had gone silent beyond the outer rim. Colonies erased so completely they had been written off as navigational loss. Designation populated the display, exterminator class. No diplomacy markers. No communication protocols, just expansion vectors and consumption curves that ended in extinction. "Distance?" Command asked. "Approximately 4,100 light-years," the officer replied. "Velocity suggests approach measured in decades." Silence. Followed. Not shock, but recognition. "So it's still out there," someone said. "Yes," Fleet Command replied. "And it's active." Orders flowed with the same calm that had ended the war. Deep-range probes launched. Exploration fleets flagged. Archive locks released. Ancient losses cross-referenced against the new data. The operational timetable expanded. Years, not hours. Outside the bridge, the galaxy was already adjusting. Former Ravager worlds reorganized under new law. Trade routes reopened. Prisoners were processed. A war concluded without ash. Human ships adjusted formation by a fraction of a degree, turning, not toward conquered space, but toward the dark beyond the charts. A second standalone line appeared, almost austere. The horizon moved. The humans had finished one war exactly as planned. The next one had been waiting far longer than anyone else had known.